Can you imagine that happening? I can't imagine that happening here. It better not. If it ever does, we got a problem. But could you imagine that happening in the church? And this is what James is talking about. How could somebody call themselves a follower of Jesus Christ and yet judge someone that way, just by their outward appearance? Now, according to some scholars, what James is talking about, the way, the context he uses it, they believe James actually saw this happen in the church. And I seem to agree that I think this really could have happened. And even if it was hypothetical, throughout church history, we see this very thing occurring. Because, admit it or not, church history shows that we have a tendency to be elitist. We do. In 1739, John Wesley had to preach in cemeteries and on street corners because the poor were not going to church. They weren't wanted in the church. It had become so elitist and inhospitable to the common man that they didn't want to be there. There was no room for them in the church. None whatsoever. Then in 1820, William Booth and his wife, who started the Salvation Army, he was sitting there and he's looking at the church and he's saying, there are no poor people here. And he's like, why? Why aren't there any poor people here? And what had happened was, the poorest people never wanted to come to the church because they were made to feel inferior to everybody else. And it was this and many other circumstances that caused him and his wife to go out and start the Salvation Army, which went to the street corners and went to the poor. And today, I'm not so sure we do a whole lot better. It's usually not about financial. I mean, it's not a financial that we don't look at somebody and look at them that way, but there are churches who will just fall and fawn all over a young family that comes into the church. But the single person who comes in, they ignore. I've talked to people. I can tell you stories of people who walked into the church, have been there 20 minutes to a half an hour before the service, walking around, wandering aimlessly, obviously looking like a visitor, and nobody talks to them. Nobody talks to them because they're single. One person. And there's some churches that get excited when they see a mother and father and their 2.5 kids. I mean, that's the ideal family, right? And they're just so excited to see this family come to the church. But then when the mother who has 3 kids, single mother, and they're all screaming, we don't want them around, right? We ignore them. In society today, I'm fearing that society is seeing racism, and not even racism, but what I would call political racism, rearing its ugly head. And my fear is that it's going to get into the church if it's not there already. I think that's why I'm preaching this today, is because I want to make sure we know we cannot be this way. See, the tendency of most churches is to desire new people to come to the church. But we want new people that look like us, right? We want new people who look like us, even though we, in reality, are not anything like we think we look like. The church is a place where all are welcome. No matter what has happened to them, all are welcome.